This is a Renault Megane, but not as you know it. And that's because Renault's going all in on electric cars at the moment, and so it's turned its attention to its family hatchback and given it the EV treatment. It's a radical departure from the Megane we've come to know, and it's aimed at taking on the likes of attainable EVs such as the Volkswagen ID.3. Now, how does the Megane compare? Well, today I'm going to try and find out. But before I go any further, if you like what we do, why not give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more awesome videos, just like this one. Controversial opinion, I think this is the most interesting Megane Renault has made since the one that appeared in the mid-2000s. You remember the one with the flat rear windscreen and that kind of curved boot lid? Now that car caused a big stir when it first came out because it didn't look like anything that had come before it. And I kind of think the same thing is going to be the case with this new Megane E-Tech. Now from a distance, this kind of looks like an SUV because we've got bits of cladding around the wheel arches and down the side of the car, and just overall its proportions make it look taller than it actually is. It sits at 1.5 meters tall, making it sit lower to the ground than a Renault Zoe. Renault has also pushed the wheels right to the edge of the car, which opens up 2.7 meters of wheelbase, which should make the interior nice and roomy. There are lots of little interesting design features on the Megane E-Tech too. For example, you've got a sloping rear roofline that feeds into this little wing, which genuinely makes the car look quite dynamic and sporty. It's also a two-tone design, so we've got the midnight blue car here, but there are 5 other colors that you can choose from, and that contrasts nicely with a gloss black roof. At the back, we've got a light bar that runs along the width of the car, and you've got really gorgeous LEDs at the front of the car as well that just gives the car a really sharp look, particularly at night. We've got 20-inch wheels on this car, which just seems massive for a family hatchback, and I'm really intrigued to see how it rides, but on the surface, I think they look really very good. Other features I like, you've got the little gold highlights around the front and rear of the car, which I think just sets it apart from other more mundane family hatchbacks. And the actual side of the car is super smooth because you've got a pop-out door handle for the driver and front passenger, and then at the rear, the handles are integrated really neatly into the top of the door. Another cool little feature I like about the Megane E-Tech is that the E on Megane is gold, which tells you that it's not a normal Megane, although all normal Meganes will be this going forward. Anyway, boot space. You've got a little button just here, so nothing in the badge, no button that you've got to press underneath here. It's just this tiny little button right here. Press that, pops open. It's not automatic tailgate, but when we do open it up, we get 440 litres, which is actually 55 litres more than you get on the VW ID.3. And it's a really deep boot as well, so you can get quite big bulky items into the back, no problem. The only downside though is that you do have quite a big load lip, so getting stuff in and out of the car, particularly shopping, might become a little bit of a pain. Back to the good bits though, you have a little bit of extra storage underneath the boot floor where you can stow away your charging cables. There are 2 motor and 2 battery options available in the new Megane E-Tech. Now on the motor side, they're all front mounted and they're all front wheel drive, but you get them in 2 different outputs. One producing 130 horsepower and another producing a whopping 220 horsepower. And on the battery side, you've got a 40 kilowatt hour battery, which offers you up to 186 miles of range. And there's also a long range version, which is 60 kilowatt hours. And with that, you can get up to 292 miles. Charging is pretty damn fast as well, because you can option in 130 kilowatt charging. Now, if you find a suitable charger, that means that, let's say if you go for the 60 kilowatt version, you can get up to 186 miles of range in just 30 minutes. And speaking of battery and charging, Renault is very proud about the battery that it's put in its new Megane E-Tech, which it claims is the thinnest on the market at just 11 millimeters in thickness.
That's 11 centimeters, not 11 millimeters. You idiot.
And that means that on the inside, you can have a completely flat floor, opening up even more space. It's when you step in the new Megane E-Tech that you realise just how far this car has moved forwards, because even though this is an absolute top-spec car, so it's fully loaded, it feels like a really premium product. We've got leather effect on top of the dashboard, on the armrest, and also on these very, very comfy sport seats, which also have perforated leather effects in the center. That contrasts really nicely with this kind of wood finish, which is really lovely. And that's mixed up with some metal highlights as well. So you've got a nice mix of materials inside the new Megane E-Tech. The steering wheel is really nice too. It's kind of squared off, so it looks really sporty. And it's got a very minimalist, slim look to it. And it's just a joy to hold. Really very lovely, with a couple of paddles on the back to go through the different energy recovery settings. You've got quite a few buttons on here as well. They're not touch operated, they are physical buttons, but it's a bit of a vague system. But you do have a couple of rockers either side, and also a button down here for the different driving modes. Storage is plentiful as well. I've got a massive bin underneath the armrest, and ahead of that is a little tray with a couple of USB-C ports. We've also got a wireless charger in the center of the dashboard, and just a generic massive storage tray down here, which is customizable, and you've got a cup holder as well. But what really dominates the experience are the pair of screens that are ahead of you, and they're now actually powered by Google, and that makes a gigantic difference. So if we take this central display, which is actually portrait as opposed to the more conventional landscape systems, everything is just ultra responsive and really neatly laid out. It's very similar to the systems that you get in Volvos. You can actually watch my review of an electric Volvo by clicking the link in the top right hand corner. That means you have Google Maps for your sat-nav system, and you can make use of Google Assistant too. Plus, being a Google powered car, you can download more apps through the Google Play Store. But if you want to use your own phone to hook up to the system, then you can still access Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is something that I personally prefer because I like using Waze, as it picks out speed cameras. But if you do use the Google system, then it will come up on your digital driver's display, and the display itself is super sharp and very quick to respond. It's a huge improvement over the old Renault systems, and also a lot better than its rivals, a certain VW ID.3. Given that we've got that flat floor and quite a long wheelbase, I'm a little disappointed with the space in the back of the Megane E-Tech. Now, I've got the driver's seat in my position. I'm just under 6 foot, and I've not got a lot of leg room to spare. So if you're 6 foot and over, it is going to feel a little bit cramped back here. Headroom isn't that bad, but again, if you're on the tall side, you might find it just feeling a little bit tight in the back of the Megane. Also, the seats are very flat. So if you go into something like a VW ID.3, and you can watch my review of that by clicking the link in the top right-hand corner, VW install these almost bucket-like seats of where you really sink into them, and it means they're much more comfortable than having a flat seat like we have here, and like I've seen in a lot of other EVs. And that means you've got this big gap between your leg and the base of the seat, so it kind of renders it almost a little bit pointless. Other than that, it does feel quite nice back here. The quality of the seats are pretty nice, and we've got a couple of USB-C charging ports. But on the whole, it's a bit of a disappointment back here. There's just a couple more things I wanted to point out now we're in the Megane E-Tech on the road. One of them is the digital rear view mirror. So it's basically a camera pointing out the back which relays a video feed directly to you. Now, I've used them before in the Honda E, and you can watch my review of that by clicking the link in the top right-hand corner, and I didn't have any problem with it. But in here, it just doesn't seem to work as well as I'd like it to. I find that the perspective of it is too zoomed in, so I feel like it doesn't give you a very accurate representation of your rear view. And the other thing I wanted to point out was the ambient lighting, which has got this kind of weird little theme to it, of where when you get in the car in the morning, you can have the colours be of a cooler nature, like greens and blues. And then in the afternoon, it'll get warmer, so oranges and reds, to simulate the fact that time is progressing and that it's soon going to be time to wind down and go to bed. Now, you can override that and just have whatever colour you want, but still, I thought it was a interesting, if a little strange, feature to have. Another cool feature is the steering. Now, Renault has basically quickened up the steering rack on the new Megane E-Tech, which is kind of what you see on performance cars, supercars and racing cars. So in theory, what the idea is that it makes it much more easier to maneuver. It doesn't feel like you're hauling around a big heavy car, and let's face it, electric cars are heavy. But in practice, I think it's a bit more of a mixed bag, because I feel as though it's been designed for the streets of Paris or London, where even the smallest input at the wheel results in a change of direction, and I think it just takes a little bit of getting used to. It's a sensation I absolutely love in performance cars, but in something like a family hatchback, it can just feel almost a little bit too darty. So you're probably thinking, heavy car, big wheels, ride quality is probably not going to be that great, but it is actually really impressive. Now granted, we're in the south of Spain at the moment and the roads are really, really good. They're ultra smooth, so they're not representative of what we have back home in the UK. But you can still get a good idea, even over relatively small bumps, how a car is going to react. And sure, it's not perfect, it's not absorbing every little ripple in the road, but it's a lot more comfortable than I was expecting. Performance-wise, Renault's claiming a 0 to 62 time of 7.4 seconds, which will be for the faster 220 horsepower car. And really, I actually think it feels quite a bit faster than that. Because it's an electric car and you've got that near instant torque, it just gets off the line so quickly. Now, it doesn't feel like a performance car, it doesn't feel sporty, but it just feels like it can handle pretty much anything. But I think even if you went for the 130 horsepower car, which admittedly I haven't been able to try, I still think it should feel relatively fast because, again, you've got that near instant torque, so it should feel pretty quick off the line. It's 0 to 30 that matters more in an electric car than 0 to 60. There are also different driving modes that you can go through as well. So I've currently got it in Eco because I'm trying to save as much battery as possible. But you've also got Sport, Personalised or Individual, and Comfort. Now, doesn't feel like there's a huge difference between the different ones. Obviously with Individual you can go through different settings and basically set it up the way you'd want to. Now in Sport mode it is going to sharpen up the throttle response. It's not going to feel like a proper hot hatch. For that we'll have to wait for the Alpine version. Hopefully one of those will come along. But just to get you up to speed to get onto a motorway, it does the job just fine. And the cherry on the cake is an upgraded suite of semi-autonomous driving systems. And the big one is the adaptive cruise control, which has now been adjusted so that it not only slows down for cars that are ahead of you, but it'll also adjust its speed depending on the road that you're on. So let's say you're coming up to a twisty set of bends and it's a 90 km/h zone like I'm in at the moment, then it'll actually start slowing down for the corners to make sure you don't go flying off a cliff. And it'll also do the same thing for roundabouts too. So if you're approaching a roundabout, the system will start to slow down. And I think that's really handy if you're going along a motorway, but sometimes these systems can just be a little bit overly cautious, and there's times where you just want to basically take a corner just a little bit faster than the system wants you to. Now, for me to give this a definitive, this is better than the ID.3, I'd need to know the price, and Renault hasn't announced it yet. We're expecting it though to be in the region of about £35,000 or maybe even a little bit more. Renault is very much positioning this as a direct rival to the ID.3, and I'd expect it to be priced to compete with it. But from my first impression, this feels like quite a big step up over an ID.3. Not only does it drive really well, aside from the very, very sharp and darty steering, but it's the tech in here that's just really great. You've got a properly good infotainment system, really nice high resolution screens, and you feel like you're in a very high-tech car. And even if this costs a little bit more than the ID.3, I still think it would be worth it. This does feel like a big improvement over its rivals.